Life, wisdom.
Okay, it is Thursday, November 29th, 2012 in Austin, Texas. I'm John Breeding, and this is the last chapter of my book, Leaving Home, The Journey from Birth to Emerging Adulthood. This is chapter 14, the final chapter, and it's called Going Somewhere. Chapter 13 was on letting go, and chapter 14 is Going Somewhere. I was originally going to call the book Leaving Home, Letting Go, and Going Somewhere. The going somewhere part of life is very, very important, and I wanted to end the book on that note. As usual, I'll start out with epigraphs from my buddy Leonard Roy Frank. Here's one from Erich Fromm in 1976. Heroes are those with the courage to leave what they have, their land, their family, their property, and move out, not without fear, but without succumbing to their fear. Courage is not about being fearless, it's about acting in the face of fear. The next is from Leonard Bialis, 1986. The quest is always marked by a sense of struggle, of imminent or actual danger, in which all of the hero's will and power will be called forth in order to push on. The hero's quest goes beyond self-fulfillment, culminating in a boon or gift that has social and cultural value for the community as a whole. So I talked about the hero's journey in the last video, but this aspect of bringing forward a gift to the community and going somewhere with that is the ultimate task in leaving home. And the last from the Western writer Louis L'Amour, 1980. There will come a time when you believe everything is finished. That will be the beginning. Leaving home is the beginning of going somewhere. So I'm going to read you first couple of chapters from the book. First couple of paragraphs in the last chapter of the book. The central task for the developing human is leaving home again and again and again in different ways at different ages. Each and every time a profound letting go is required. But what about going somewhere? It's true we sometimes go just for the sake of going, just to wander, and that's a sweet thing to do too. But it's a different aspect when you're going somewhere, when you have a direction, right? It makes a big difference when there's intention, when there's purposeful movement. I'm reminded of the ship captain as he leaves harbor. With no intended port of arrival, I suppose he sails with the winds and currents. But with a clear destination, he navigates accordingly, and that is a different kind of trip. I'm also reminded of the story I told in chapter 10 about Malidoma Soma's Dagara tribe in Burkina Faso. Remember, the grandfather interviews the mother when she's pregnant with the baby. She goes into a trance, and the baby speaks. The soul of the baby speaks through the mother's voice as the grandfather asks this being about his or her purpose in coming into the world. Why are you being born into our tribe? And what are your gifts? What do you have to bring to us? The purpose of that is so the elders can watch and support the development of the young person and make sure that the community does not lose out on the gifts that that person has to bring. It's going somewhere, bringing something forward. Wayne Dyer talks about thinking from the end. You know, this is really thinking from the end. You already have a vision of purpose and contribution to the community, and you're thinking from that point of view. Going somewhere involves that you have a vision and that you're reaching for that, holding that focus, that intention, that purpose. I'm going to share with you from psychologist James Hillman, who died a couple of years ago, but he wrote this one book that I liked a lot called The Soul's Code. And he talked about 3 ways to nourish a child's imagination. And the first one was to have parental fantasies about your child. Not heavy duties, all breedings are doctors and you better be a doctor or I'm going to reject you, or like that. But more like a lighthearted fantasy of when a child is climbing and exploring, oh, you're going to be a great explorer. Or when the child plays their guitar, it's like, oh, I can see you being a rock star. Or whatever. And having a fantasy like that and putting it out there. It nourishes the imagination. And most of the time, it's just something for the young person to push up against and say, that's your fantasy, Dad, that's not me. But sometimes maybe it is a recognition of the qualities that the child is expressing. I also talked in chapter 13 about maturity coaching, and the idea of supporting a young person by asking what they want and what their goals are and what their strategies are and helping them think about that. It's not what we want for them. Hillman's second way of nourishing a child's imagination was called be generous with your child's obsessions. I love that because it contradicts this kind of fear-based mental illness model of obsession. That's a mental illness symptom, isn't it? Be generous with your child's obsessions. What does that mean? It means that the things that the child is really caught up in are somehow expressions that may be related to their purpose in life because it's coming from within in their desire. Be generous with that, right? One caveat is that we have a very twisted society in many ways, and that's why I wrote a parenting manifesto for the 21st century, which you can find on my website, wildestcolts.com. It's just acknowledging that our society is highly distressed in many ways and very exploitive, and the powers that be, the corporate entities, in the media that supports them, see children as product points, as profit points. So they'll sell anything, whether it's psych drugs or poisonous foods, toxic products, whatever. And a lot of those things are pretty addictive, like video games and candy and things like that. Being generous with your child's obsession doesn't mean abdicating responsibility to protect from the things that the child cannot understand yet because they're a child. So that's a caveat. One beauty of Jeffrey Arnett's work, who we've talked about here, who's done so much work on emerging adulthood, as Shelley says so well in chapter 12, is that it allows us to relax a little, let go of worry, negative stereotypes, and regain our confidence about the trajectory of our young people's lives. We can relax about young people taking some extra time as young adults to continue to explore and try things on. And let 30 be the new 20. That the end result of that can and will be a purposeful, engaged life. We don't need to come from a place of worry and fear about that. I'm going to go ahead and mention number 3. It's not so directly relevant to this subject, but it's my favorite one of Hillman's 3 ways of nourishing a child's imagination. I just love it. He says, have a generous assortment of odd fellows and peculiar ladies in the perimeter of a child's life. I love it. Okay, last couple of thoughts on this leaving home. And it's related to this idea that you can relax about it and be confident about it. And here's a couple of reasons. One is that self-determination is a deep, strong, inherent aspect of human nature. And it's there in every young person. All we have to do is allow and support that dynamic. And maybe at times help them out a little bit around any distresses that have covered that up. But self-determination is there, and that's what we support. And the second thing is that I've already talked about is that everybody is born with unique gifts and with a purpose that is at a deep level, if you want to call it a soul level, whatever. To trust that that's there and to try to watch and look for ways to help resource and support that thing, to trust in that trajectory. And then remember hold fast. I talked a lot about hold fast when I discussed the hero's journey, right? The parent holding on that has to let go. And the young person has to push back against our tendencies like my children did with me to hold on, right? And it's not just parents, it's also society that wants people to conform and obey, right? That's a transformational ordeal. It's going to happen. There's going to be pushback. There's going to be struggle. But it's a worthy effort. We are lucky that young people are so strong and stubborn about taking on our hold-fast tendencies and standing up for themselves in the move towards independence, like my daughter talking to the hand. So let's end with an example from another of my students that exemplifies this strength. Kurt writes with that emerging adult edge that I love so much as he really takes on the push to be normal. So I'm going to end with the words of an emerging adult. I grew up in a white-collar suburb of Washington, D.C. It's a quaint little place where for children, normality is second only to Facebook profiles and social currency. From the time I enrolled in public school there in the 3rd grade, I was indoctrinated, as school is wont to do. As time passed, one doctrine was pushed harder and harder, the American dream, according to the Fairfax County public school system, in their attachment to the white-collar, arch-conservative, picket fence type of life. It became clear that apparently my purpose in life was to go to high school and succeed so I could go to a good school, then go forth and conquer in the real world. After this, the final phase was to return to my manicured homeland, a captain of industry, to have 2.5 kids and restart the vicious cycle. Except I didn't do that. In September of 2008, I joined the local volunteer fire department at age 16. The shock and horror that ensued was at best comical, but at worst left parents, not my own, exiling me for leaving the comfortable lifestyle of the relatively wealthy for the more dangerous and blue-collar life on the fire engine. My apparent lack of normality was perceived as a threat by the hive mind, and I was cast out for fear that I would spoil the rest of the youth. Eventually, I would continue on my trek away from normality and move into another field Fairfax feared, the arts. Like my son, go Kurt. In my case, the film industry. My experience with normality was highly adversarial, and left many bridges burned in the name of dreams. If nothing else, I came away from it with an understanding of a society that protects its beliefs through a means of not so subtle strong-arm tactics. They protect their young, as we see elephants do on the animal planet. I, apparently, was a cheetah in the equation. All right. I shall return when my book is in hand. It's at the publishers right now. But I hope you enjoy this video series. I'll have the whole thing posted up on my website soon. Thank you.